Hello and welcome to this astrological forecast for the lunar cycle of the 25th of June to the 23rd of July 2025. We are working with Runic Astrology. My name is Maggie Rose Cunningham, and many years ago now, I was working with the Zodiac. I was interested in astrology, and I couldn't sort of quite feel it. I started dancing with the signs of the Zodiac, trying to work with the symbols as energy forms. It was fun. I think the biggest clue that that practice gave me was that I was going to find an astrological system that worked for me better in the long term. And that's what I'm going to be sharing with you today. We're going to be looking at Runic Astrology. I'm going to be sharing with you a couple of ways in which I work with it. So we're going to look at this template here, which shows you the movements of the planets through the Runic Wheels. The Elder Futhark, and this is the ecliptic circle that the planets are moving through. The colours that you can see here relate to Northern Hemisphere seasons. So sun here is positioned down here in Dargaz, just moving through Dargaz. We've just had the summer solstice, which happens right here in the very heart of the Dargaz rune. So that's how this one works. We're going to be looking, in a moment, we'll look at an overview, because what this does is it helps us to really see the movements of the planet. And you will notice that the way that I work is I decided after lots of experimentation to, broadly speaking, work with the planetary symbols that we are familiar with. So you'll notice a couple of differences. So this is my Odin's chariot, which is the equivalent of Mercury. And I have a little dot in the center there, which to me represents Odin's one eye. And for some reason, I put a dot in Tyr's chariot, which is the martial energy this time round, which I don't normally do. But yeah, quite pretty, and I'm quite enjoying it. So who knows, I might keep that going moving forward. We're going to be looking at our disc, but another way that you can work with the cycle is you can look at it in a more linear way. So this is working from the Dargaz new moon on the 25th and taking us all the way through to the end of the cycle. You can see here I've got the planet, and up here we've got the runes, and we've also got these little R's, tiny little R's, which represent points when 3 planets this month are going to go into retreat, which you're probably more familiar with being referred to as retrograde. I'll tell you a little bit more about that today, because that'll be one of the themes that we look at, because we've got 3. We've also got over here at the very end of this cycle, this is the symbol that I use for Retrograde, Baldur's Wall. And we're not going to spend a lot of time talking about that today. But these are the halls that Freya Aswin, the rune mistress Freya Aswin, assigned to the signs of the Zodiac. And I like to trace them, I like to follow them, and they can be really useful. For me, I started working with them after I'm not going to say mastered, no one fully mastered, after I've been working for many years with the movements of the runes, then I started to bring in the halls as well. So for most of this cycle, we will be in Heimdall's hall, which I have here as a rainbow bridge with an eye going through it. He is a highly sensitive deity. If you are highly sensitive or self-identify as being highly sensitive, then I would highly recommend working with Heimdall, God who can hear everything. He hears the grass grow across the realms. And then at the very end, we're going to move into Baldur's Hall. Those of you who are members of Lunar Star Wheel will know that we had a story session for Hod to honour the summer solstice, build for that summer solstice. Now that story has come down now. We've got a new one. We're working with Ul and Njord. They came through. The Hunter and the Fisherman is a story that's there for you in your Lunar Star Wheel resources. Don't worry about that if you're not a member of Lunar Star Wheel. I'll tell you a little bit more about that probably at the end. So that's where the halls move, and I've just developed my own little symbols for that. So Baldur is a god of light, so it's a little starburst for us there. So please feel free to pause me if you want to copy out the chart. You absolutely can. And if you are a member of Lunar Star Wheel, you have this template in your resources so that you can print it out and you can follow along. And what I do is I get my compass and I draw 1, 2, 3, 4 circles so that I can then position my planets. So I do the slow moving planets, the ones that are moving very slowly around the outside, and then I do my fast movers move further in, and then we've got the moon in the center. Now the moon is really potentizing the Dargaz energy. So we've got the sun here in Dargaz, Suna's chariot, she starts out in Dargaz, and then the new moon is also in Dargaz. It's really oomphy gateway energy of transformation, stepping through. If there are any skins that you are shedding at the moment, a new moon ritual today to release that and to let that go so that you can step forward into that space of transformation will be very powerful for you at this time. But what I wanted to draw your attention to for this cycle is Odin's chariot year. And the reason for that is I very sexily and magically have a clothes peg here that there it is, that keeps the pages of the rest of my astrological journal from falling down on top of this one. But what I wanted to do was to compare and contrast previous months with Odin's chariot. So you will see here that Odin's chariot back in April to May moved through 4 runes. The sun moved through 3, she always moves through 3. Frigg, she moved through 2 at that point. And this gives us a little bit of a clue. So if we move on then and look at the next cycle, you can see that Frigg moves through 3 here, and Odin moves through 5 runes. He's speeding along. But when we get to this cycle here, Frigg, 3, soon as chariot, soon as always 3, Odin, just 2. Now, the reasons for this is because of the way in which the planets go on retreat, the way in which, because of the motion of the Earth around the sun, we perceive some of the planets, or the wanderers, we might call them, the astral bodies in the sky that are sort of moving, and we go, oh, what's going on with them? And they're moving around the ecliptic, and we can track them. They look as if they're going backwards. So Frigg's chariot goes backwards about once every 18 months, and she goes back for a relatively long period of time. And she has finished a retreat, because she had just finished a retreat just ahead of April, so she was not yet speeding up fully, which is why she moved through 2 runes, whereas now she's in her nice steady pace now. So she's really like in her comfort zone here. You can see here on my tracker here that I have all of the planets, and I say this is the rune that they start in. So Odin starts out in Uruz, although we don't have Uruz along the top line here, that's because he's already in Uruz. So this gives you a clue as to where the planets start out. And so she's moving along nicely and steadily through Largus, Ingus, and we'll do a little bit of Frigg's chariot now, because we're not going to dive into her fully in this session. Very if we did that. But what I like to do with my readings, and this is where all of that sort of dancing with the zodiac movements, all of those things came in handy for me, is that I realized that when I work with my mind only, I don't get as deep a connection. My seer doesn't come out, my seer self doesn't come out. I'm all in my sage head. Great, helping me to speak to you right now and explain to you what's going on. But my seer doesn't come out. My seer likes to feel with the body. So I have this rune set, which I painted a long time ago. You can see them down the side here. I've got some of them ready. And I like working with these runes. I work with these a lot with groups, and I work with them for these astrological readings, because they're all shaped differently. So I get used to the feel of them in the bag. And then they're not as easy to use for readings, because you know what's coming. So if I take the rune that triggers in at the moment here, this is the Largus rune here, and I feel into the energy of Frigg's chariot, which is why it is helpful if you think, I want to become a runic astrologer, I want to follow the movements of the runes through, or I should say the planets through the runes. Get to know your runes first, because then you can start to feel into the energy of the planets, because they are different to the Venusian energy, let's say, Frigg's chariot. So Frigg's chariot really governs relationships and connection of all sorts, particularly social relationships. Now, Frigg is very much her handmaidens, that the goddess of collaboration and getting on with all people. So it's not so much romantic, I would say. Now, my theory is that Frigg and Freya share the chariot of Venus, and I've written blog articles about this, about the morning star and the evening star and how that works. And that Freya can bring a different aspect, but again, it is an aspect of which part of myself do I need to bring to my influencing, my negotiating, my working with people right now. And this is a really lovely time to be working on ancestral relationships still. We obviously had the energy of the people who work in the Celtic tradition of Beltane, but it's also a time when the veils definitely open between the world from this point of when the sun moves through Largus, which Suna has already done, opens up the veils between the worlds, allows us to work deeply with ancestral work, but also with family and kith and kin. Very important time to be working with the people at your heart, the people who you care about, and solidifying and consolidating those relationships. So she moves through Largus, she moves through Ingu, the rune of the seed, which has been very, very powerful, and we'll mention Ingu in a minute in relation to Ur's chariots, and then into Athala, the rune of ancestry. of estate. And she offers a really grounding energy because there's a lot of stuff going on through the course of this cycle. So if you're struggling a little bit, Frigg is your friend for this cycle that you might want to be working with. I'm just going to put those runes down. Worked with them, Ingrid's back, work with Ud here. So Frigg is in a nice, even cycle right now, and sooner the sun is also, she always moves through. She starts out in one rune and then she passes through 2 runes every lunar month. About once every 2 weeks, she transitions through the runes. So she brings that nice steady state. And what you will notice is that the sun, soon as Chariot, Frigg's Chariot, Venus, and Odin's Chariot, Mercury, are always very close together. They're sort of traveling as a pack. And these are the runes of really of sort of conscious awareness. The moon is in there as well, but of what's happening for us in our personal lives, with our relationships in the case of Frigg's Chariot, with our ideas and what we want to bring forward into the world in the case of Odin's Chariot. Now, Odin is going to go on retreat during this cycle. And this is why, unlike the previous cycle when he traveled through 5 runes, he was like at top speed at that point. This time he's going to start in Uruz. He's going to go into Thurisaz. And he's going to spend a really long time there. Okay? He's going to spend a really long time there. So if we look at our linear diagram, you'll see, so he's going to start out in Uruz, and then he's going to move into Thurisaz on the 3rd of July. And he's going to be like, la, 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 I'm going all the way through Thurisaz. I'm not on retreat yet. I'm not on retreat yet. Oh, but now I'm going to start to go backwards. And he's going to stay in Thurisaz and travel all the way back through Thurisaz and back into Uruz for a tiny period in the next cycle. So this makes this a really important cycle for us and a very powerful cycle for us. Now, I talk about the chariots going into retreat, or the deity going into retreat, I should say. So the chariot obviously keeps going. No, the planet doesn't disappear, it's still going there, but it's traveling backwards. And it's almost like the intentional energy of the patron deity is missing, because this is my belief, this is the teaching that I've received from Odin, is direct revelation. We have very fragmentary information about the way in which our Northern European ancestors would have worked with astrology, although I think there are strong indicators that there was some form of astrological system at play, but we don't have enough evidence to know exactly what that is. So we are doing our best to work with a system that, you know, I've tried a number of different systems, and this is the one. My work is based on Nigel Pennick's work. I work with that. But I haven't found anything that talks about retrograde energy. And so I worked particularly with Odin. He goes into retrograde every three times a year. And what became clear to me as he was talking is this sense that as a sovereign deity, so Odin is, you know, he's the wanderer, he's the all-father, he has all of these different aspects to him. And in order to birth the runes as he did, he needed to leave the throne and go down and hang upon the world tree and be there for 9 days and 9 nights, undertaking a deep shamanic initiatory process. And he goes off and he wanders in the world. He is a gatherer of wisdom. You know? And I believe he also goes for his own healing. You know, he's a very dedicated sovereign. He wants to bring his wisdom. He wants to be in the best place that he can be. So he's role modeling for us why it is that we need to go away and spirit quest. You know, spirit questing in the modern world is perhaps something that we see as being a luxury rather as being, if I want to lead, where am I leading from? You know? And Odin teaches that. He says, I go away in order to remember where I'm leading from. And during that period of time, the realms that he's responsible for, voice, vision, conscious awareness, all of those things are disrupted because he's not there. That intentional sovereign energy isn't there. And what he says is, he says, the ball's in your park right now. You know? So you can either take that, the disruptions that will happen, and often they happen when we have we start out in our we start it in our Uruz energy here, our lovely Uruz rune there. And then we move into Thurisaz. You can see how contrasting the 2 rune stones are. Sort of feel them. And when I have the Uruz rune in my hand, there's a real sense of weight, you know, like the weight of the earth. And it reminds me of Ymir. So Odin, to me during this time, goes and he recognizes his own primal nature. He recognizes that he comes from the Jotun, who are his traditional energy, and are also represented by the Thurisaz rune. So this too is part of my roots. I am a god of consciousness and order. but I come from a place of chaos and disorder, or rather the order of nature, let's say, which is wild and untamable. So he goes to recover that untamable part of himself, which is an Uru's process of healing, but it's also a Thurisaz process of healing, of embracing the shadow. So Odin, back in the day, one of the founding myths is of his slaying of Ymir, and to me, Uruz often speaks of Ymir, and it is to me at this point, a very, very ancient, enormous giant who Odin and his two brothers, Vili and Ve, slew in order to then build the Midgard, our world in particular, from his body. And what's interesting is that we have then the realm of the giant, the rune of the giants here, which brings in this idea that it was fate. Now, this is something that Odin was fated to do, good or bad. He went about, he did it. So there's almost this, if you are somebody who feels guilt or regret or shame, or you look back on certain things that you did in the past and you go, I wish I could undo that. To me, Odin holds that space of saying, but if you could, you would have to undo everything that came following on from that. The best that you can do is to be the best that you can be based on what has happened in the past. And I think this is very, very important for all human beings, but perhaps particularly for those of us who know that our ancestral heritage includes within it the colonial past. And for some of us, that will be a direct, I can trace back to my ancestors and I can see things that they did that I would bring shame, and for some of us, it might be that we go, well, actually, I can see that I had people who were victims of that same system that was flowing from the land that I was part of, but I was one of the victims within that. Most of us were going to have both, and it's recognizing that and saying, okay, you can't change that. Go and face the shadow with the Thurisaz, and then say, what do I do from there? When I re-emerge from this period, who will I be? What will I choose? Is what Odin counsels. It's this time of accepting strength and recognizing that when the annoyances come, the technology doesn't work, we move into arguments or whatever it is, and all of those things, step back into the bigger picture of why you're here, what you came for. Maybe an unraveling of those threads coming from that space of like everything is really horrible right now and I hate it, actually stepping back and going, it could be much worse. The fact that I'm standing here talking to you from my computer and you are looking at your computer means it could be much worse. Connect us into the bigger picture. This is a really powerful period, this Odin's Chariot and Retreat. Now, I'm going to look a little bit at the slower moving planets because that's where the other retreat energies are. So we have Hela's Chariot. She's over here. She's in Perthro here. The Perthro rune of weird and of mystery and of laughter and of flow of fate. It brings, for me, Hela's Chariot in Perthro is really this sense of karmic depth welling up. I know karma obviously is a different culture, but it's useful because most of us understand what that means. Welling up from the well of weird, which is said to periodically overflow and to cleanse all of the world. And we shelter within the arms of the world tree, within Iwaz, which is the rune of the full moon this year, the rune of the yew tree. See that? And of the world tree. We shelter within its arms and all is washed away. And I would say that Hela's Chariot moved into Perthro about 4.5 years ago now. We're over the halfway point of Hela's Chariot being in Perthro. It's a 9-year cycle. Started in January 2020, and world events started to shift quite rapidly. So, she's always there, sort of hanging out, doing her thing. Then we've got two powerful chariots in Bacano and two slow-moving chariots. We've got Aegir's Chariot in Bacano, the rune of the dream space and of unconscious realms and of things that are just on the liminal sort of birthing there, and innovation as well. All of those sources of innovation. And this is the rebirth period in Bacano. I'm not going to talk a huge amount about those, but those are important. Now, Aegir's Chariot is going to go into retrograde, so confidently, there we go, on the 4th of July. And what that means is exactly the same as I said with Odin's Chariot. When Aegir is there and he's directing that space of innovation and of dream, and it's coming in like the tide rushing inwards, And then when he goes on in retreat, the tide almost rushes outwards, and we don't have that directing energy anymore. But what we do have is the things that have been left behind when the tide recedes. So there are opportunities, and there is sort of an ingathering. If you keep a dream diary, go back and look over the dream diary and see what you can get from that. If you do regular readings, you can go look back over your readings and prepare yourself. It's this process of integration, I think, that comes through at this point when we're not having that direct water energy sort of pushing us through. We're having that time when we integrate, and particularly with the Carno rune, which is got its 2 points on it, so you can see that it's often thought of as being like the mother rune, but the rebirthing mother. It's like the deep earth and the rebirthing plants that come from it. And so it's that sense of moving into the space of the deep earth a little bit, where you can see the roots and you can understand what's happening. So Aged Chariot going onto retreat isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it is a sort of excavating and a reflecting space of time. Now, the other chariot is Loki's chariot, and I could spend a lot of time talking about this, and I really want to do a live just on Loki's chariot in Bacano. Very, very powerful, moved in this year. There are a lot of deeper mysteries with Bacano that Loki reveals. He is a patron of this rune, even though it's seen as being the rune of the divine feminine in many ways, and often seen as being a very youthful, birthing energy. Loki brings in that shape-shifting, trickster energy and offers a sense of camouflage and stability and being able to reshape ourselves, to rebirth our second skins, our energetic being. There's a lot there, and I would love to discuss it more, but if you're interested, just say in the chat, or Maggie, do something more on Loki's Chariot and Bacano. I know I had a couple of requests, and it's one of those things that are on my to-do list, but keep falling down the to-do list. Loki. Now, does Loki go on retreat? Yes. So Loki, here we go, is also going to go on retreat during this period. So on the 13th, he will go on retreat, which means that we've got 2 planets in retreat in Bacano at the same time. And Loki, a little bit like Odin, he's a slightly further in planet. He's sort of a bridge between the slightly more, let's say still personal realms and the collective realms. It helps us to move through those. And his is an energy of working with freedom and constraint. You know, the fact that if we're born into society, we have to accept the rules of society, but we almost have to understand the rules of society before we can rebel against them. We can't just sort of found something new without a foundationing, without that foundation of understanding the culture or the myth or whatever it is of what it is that we're seeking to change. So it's this constant interplay between desiring freedom and understanding constraint, and recognizing that sometimes we have to put boundaries in place in order for us to have the freedoms that we want. I don't know if that's landing with you, but that landed with me quite powerfully and potently at this time. You know, what are the boundaries that you are not putting in place that then mean that you have more constraints on you because, you know, people are calling on your time or your energy is low, whatever. So a lot of these things come in. And that sense of really chafing against those constraints and needing to do something intentionally about them will come through this retreat period that starts on the 13th. So our other planet that's sort of stationary, I would say they're not really stationary, there is Ud's chariot. So Ud is down here in Ingu's. I'm going to mention her very briefly. Where's our Ingu's rune gone? Oh, there it is. So there's our Ingu's rune back there. And some of you will have heard me talking about the energetic printing that Ingu's represents for me in Ud's chariot. So Ud is one of the Nornir. To me, she's sort of like the representative of the Nornir, and Fatlandian schools are right behind her. And they're rushing in change that needs to happen, that needs to occur. So they're pushing that forward. For a long period of time where they were in Lagus, the water energy was really flowing with the Hela's chariot energy and Perthro, and bringing about that sort of karmic collective change and disruption and upheaval. But then we moved into Ingus, and it's sort of like the die is set at this point. Whatever it is that you've done, you're going to have to see it through. There are consequences to decisions that have been made, and we have to accept them, not in a sense of surrendering to them, but it's sort of accepting that we have to flow with them. We can't go back and change the clock and have that time again. What's past is past, and we need to move forward. And it's the blueprint for a new age, you know, which I know lots of people say. So many astrological forecasts in lots of different traditions. New age is rebirthing, and we are being asked to support it. And you can see that with the Meccano rune as well, like the Divine Mother there supporting that. We talked a little bit about Frigg. We're done with her for today. We've talked about Odin. Well, a little bit of time on Thor's chariot, because Thor moves relatively slowly. So he hasn't moved for a little while. He's been in Darga for quite a long time, so ushering in again the new age. But he's also transitioning now. He transitions into Theou here. Lovely new cycle, life force energy. He's sort of, I like to think that he's also welcoming in this new cycle that the sun is moving through, because she's moved out of Darga, the last rune in the Elder Futhop. In not all traditions, some people see Uruz as being the lot, and it's a circle at the end of the day, I like to think, but definitely a huge gateway and a moving back into what I consider to be the primal formative energies with Theou. So he's sort of saying, yeah, you know, we're done. We've moved through that gateway now. What are you going to do? Where are you going to send your energy? Where is it going to flow? What are you going to put your resources into? Recognizing that that can mean monetary resources, certainly with Theou, but it also means life force resources of all descriptions. Your time, your care, your consideration, your concern. All of those things come through with this golden flowing energy of Theou. Thor is enjoying this energy. I can just feel that now. But yeah, he's in a happy place. You need to be in a happy place, so hang out with Thor in Theou. Tyr. So Tyr up here, he is racing ahead right now. He moves much more slowly, so it just so happens that he's sort of acting as a harbinger at this moment. And for me, when Odin is away, Tyr is really good. Thor as well, because he's a protector energy for Midgard in particular realm, but Tyr too is moving out of Anzu, so this place of expression and of telling our truth, into Rado. Here we've got, there's our Anzu's rune. The Anzu is Odin's rune, the rune of the voice, of the flow of the divine consciousness through us all, of breath, in that space of speaking our truth and sharing it, into Rado. Here we go, which is the rune of movement, of rhythm, of the road, of rituals. It's very much about doing at that point and saying, what are the quiet actions that you can take to move you forward out of this point? We're moving from words into action. And he is moving, let's find where our Tyr is. So he's moving relatively early on in this cycle. So if you're a bit like, oh, I'm tired of all of the words, I'm tired of the rhetoric, I'm tired of all the voices. It's about, what can you do? What can you do right now? Those small 1 step, 2 step moving forward. Tyr is a brilliant patron to work with when you want to take action that is aligned, that is truthful to you, who you are, what you want to be in the world. Okay. So we have our new moon in Dargaz, and then what the moon does is, the moon, Mani's chariot, travels through the wheel about 1 rune a day, not quite perfect, but pretty much there, that he ends up at the halfway point on the other side of the wheel. So he's in Iwaz. So if you're a member of Lunar Star Wheel, which is where a really lovely space for gentle practice. If you're thinking, I don't want to be doing a lot of training right now in the runes or in shamanic practice, but I want to have a container that will hold me in that spiritual connection with the runes, then Lunar Star Wheel is for you. We have our story session every month. We have a Wild Voice journaling session for each of these 2, the new moon and the full moon phases, so that you can really feel, what is it that my magical self needs to experience and feel? What wisdom do I have for myself through the lens of Dargaz? You sort of get to know the runes a little bit, but without it being right, I'm going to learn what the meanings of Dargaz are right now. You have some journaling prompts to work with for those 2 phases, lots of other resources as well, and access to our lovely live community rune circle as well. Lovely space to come in and be like, yes, I've dip my toe in and have that sense of a container for my practice, and to meet lots of lovely people who will come along to those sessions as well. And you can do that with Lunar Star Wheel. And the moon continues to move, and so it's going to move down, and this is the new moon for the next cycle. You can see how the wheel will be turning through the course of this session. So tell me, which runes are speaking to you at the moment? Do they appear in this wheel? Bearing in mind that astrology doesn't mean, oh, I must only work exclusively with the runes that the planets are moving through right now. Doesn't mean that. it means those energies for these 3 runes, the Darga, Seu, and Uru, are incredibly powerful, particularly for self-healing right now. This is why, if you know what your sun rune is, you know where the sun was in the Elder Vuthat when you were born. Working with your sun rune is the one I recommend. Brilliant for self and self-healing, because sooner, or it sort of amplifies the power of the rune without bringing her own agenda to it. Whereas I would say the rest of the planet, they've got their own spheres, their own domains, which is why I like to sort of feel the domain of the deity, of the chariot, and then place the rune within my hand. And so Mani, to me, as the charioteer of the moon, he's a lover of humanity. He sees the best within us. And so when we do our wild voice work, I'm asking Darga to support me, it is drawing out that exquisite wisdom that dwells within you. So that's like Mani's agenda, is he sees us at our best in many ways. You know, he looks down, you know, the legend of the man in the moon all comes from Mani. So great energies to work with. So tell me which runes are speaking to you that might be personal initiators for you right now that have just come up and they said, yes, no, you need to be working with me. Doesn't matter there's no planets in there because the runes are still there. You know, the planets slightly alter how we might experience those runes in any given point. So if you're working already with Perthro, you might want to be aware that, that Perthro energy is going to be influenced by Hela and by her realm during this 9-year period. Whereas if you're working with Hargalaz right now, it's Hargalaz. Hello, here, ready to work with you. So that might be the way that you want to think about it. So which runes are the most powerful for you right now? What's spoken to you from the reading? What are you excited about for the cycle ahead? What's making you go, oh, I'm a bit worried or nervous about that? And what questions do you have as well? Because we'll look to make these sessions helpful for you. If you've got any questions, like, you know, people have been in touch with me and said, we'd love a deep dive into Loki's Chariot and Bacano, let me know and we can see we can make happen.